Hello and welcome to another episode of the Law of Relevancy podcast. We speak to marketing and communications industry professionals about topics that will make us more relevant in our careers. We guarantee you're going to learn at least one thing during today's episode. I'm Cord Zoen. I'm the president of Bake More Pies, a full-service digital marketing agency based here in Tampa, Florida. And today we're speaking with Leigh George. She's the founder of Freedom, an unagency based in the DC area. Hi, Leigh. How are you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing awesome. Did you have a great New Year?
Great. I did. Thanks. How was yours?
Oh, it was excellent. Very, very busy. But yeah, had a great time. Well, today we're talking about Brand BFFs. That was a topic that you brought up when you were speaking here at the Digital Summit, and it was really intriguing to me because it seems like such a natural thing to do these days. So, Leigh, what is a Brand BFF?
Right. So, yeah, Brand BFF or Brand Besties. I talked about them in a larger context of a change in consumer behavior that is just growing in popularity and frequency. So it's really all about kind of how we behave, or our expectations are different online than they are offline. So when we're online, we expect that these really frictionless, convenient experiences, super easy, right? But when we're offline, when we were kind of meeting a brand in person in a retail location, for example, we expect to be wowed. The expectation is more of that of like an amusement park, right? We want kind of this once in a lifetime experience that we can't get anywhere else. And so, clearly there are a lot of pop-ups, and brands are doing a lot of kind of experiential marketing pop-ups and those sorts of things. But what I was really interested in was more and more often I was seeing brands coming together to create those sorts of experiences in real life. And so, so that's kind of where I came up with the term Brand Besties, or brands that are coming together and working together to create these really memorable experiences. That's
really cool. I remember when I was actually listening to your presentation, when you said Brand Besties, I immediately checked GoDaddy to see if brandbesties.com was available. I was like, man, we've got eHarmony, Match.com, Tinder. I was like, man, what a brilliant idea. We should create a dating service for brands.
Taking notes right now.
Exactly. So I did come up with a couple good ones. We'll have to talk after the show. I'll let you know what they are. Maybe we can partner on the idea. We'll be our own Brand Besties. So do you have any stories or examples or personal experience where you've seen these types of relationships in action?
Right. So I think what interests me is that you see there's a reason why these brands are coming together, right? It's not because they like each other, right? It's a very strategic matching. So oftentimes what you'll see is a more kind of traditional bricks and mortar brand partnering with a really kind of sexy online brand.
Sure.
So a couple examples of that are CVS partnering with Glam Squad. So everyone probably knows who CVS is. If you don't know, Glam Squad is this kind of on-demand beauty service, right? If you want to get makeup freshed up, or your hair done, or your nails done, you don't have to go to a salon. You can just use the Glam Squad app and they'll come to your office or to your house.
Wow.
And so the idea, I think, is that, CVS has the brick and mortar locations that Glam Squad doesn't have. Glam Squad has the audience, really kind of savvy, younger professionals that maybe CVS doesn't have, or they're not kind of considered in that way that Glam Squad is. And so by coming together, they can benefit off of what each of the other one has. So CVS is testing this concept at stores, I think in Canada, where it's kind of their makeup aisle reimagined, so that it looks more like a department store kind of makeup area where there are booths and you can sit and get consultations with Glam Squad representatives. There's more sort of high-end makeup. There's makeup that you can't get at any other CVS. So it's really, the relationship works because they're playing to each other's strengths and covering up their own weaknesses, right? So CVS wants to get younger, hipper women into their stores. Glam Squad wants to reach customers that they're not able to reach. And so it's a win-win for both.
And so to our to our knowledge, there's really not any equity there. They're just great, close relationships where they've got retail space and whatnot, right?
Right, exactly. I mean, I guess it would be, I'm sure there is cost in kind of building out this new kind of space within a store concept, right? So CVS, there's got to be some investment in that. But in general, really, it's about kind of coming together. So another similar brands where you've got kind of a more traditional retailer and an online direct-to-consumer brand is Nordstrom and Casper, the brand or the mattress company. So what Nordstrom has started to do, which is super smart, is because they're kind of all about customer service experience, they've created these pop-ups within their store that rotate. So so when they collaborated with Casper, it was a pop-up all around kind of sleep and making sure you get enough sleep and restful sleep. So they could pair Casper mattresses with pajamas, candles, other kinds of sensory things that are nice at nighttime, to create this kind of environment all around kind of wellness and sleep.
So it's not just a comfortable mattress, it's about the whole experience of getting rest.
Right, exactly. And so Casper benefits from the awareness that Nordstrom can bring to them. And then Casper's name attracts hopefully new customers, or gives them a reason to come into Nordstrom. And the nice thing about pop-up events, because they're time limited, it creates a sense of urgency, right? Like I remember when Casper launched in DC and they had this really cool pop-up and you actually had to make reservations to even get into it. They gave you slippers. There was soothing music. They had a little kind of bar with like nighttime drinks. And so it's something, it obviously, with kind of Instagram culture now, it becomes something that people want to document because it's special. Not everyone gets to go there. So having these time delimited pop-ups creates a sense of urgency and a reason to go visit a store that wouldn't have existed without that pop-up.
That makes sense. So when we're talking about like industries, so you've talked about, it seems like it's not necessarily an industry, but it just so happens this happens more often when you've got online and offline working together.
Right.
So like, for example, I didn't even realize it, but the other day I was in a Walgreens and there's Smile Direct in there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that's also another case. So it's not just about Brand Besties, but it's also, there's been so much buzz around so-called direct-to-consumer brands.
Right.
They're not really direct-to-consumer because they're still relying on all these channels, right? Casper's relying on Nordstrom, Smile Direct is relying on Walgreens. So in a sense, it's also a relationship of necessity because, to be able to sell, you really need to show up in certain channels.
That's exactly right. So like when we're developing a marketing plan for someone, when we're considering even like traditional outdoor, it's because we can get a great cost per thousands because you've got all this traffic coming through here. So if you've got a retail outlet like Nordstrom's or CVS, you've got millions of people passing through those areas. So it's a great way to get, I guess, a low cost impression as well.
Yeah, exactly. It's interesting. I came across recently, I'm actually now preparing my talks for 2020, and I came across an example of a collaboration between Adidas and Arizona Tea. So this is kind of a different, right? They're both interesting. They're both kind of consumer brands, and so the collaboration was to design an Adidas shoe with Honest Tea branding and like design. So it's like for people who are like crazy Honest Tea fans, I guess, who would be interested in an Adidas shoe with that branding on it. So it's just, I think another way Brand Besties function is it gives greater access to a brand, right? And it allows advocates or fans to really show their passion for the brand.
That makes a lot of sense. So that's a really creative way for two brands to connect. What are some other creative ways you've seen Brand Besties manifest?
I think, what was another one? I think it was a similar situation to the Adidas and, actually, sorry, I was wrong. It wasn't Honest Tea, it was Arizona Tea. But for example, Kentucky Fried Chicken recently came out with a clothing line. So it's not so much Brand Besties because I don't know that they collaborated with another brand on the clothing line, but it was just an interesting way of reimagining the brand in a form that people don't expect it. But it gives, like, if you are a hardcore KFC fan, it gives you a way to kind of show off to others at how much you love the brand, and just to develop a closer relationship by literally wearing it on your body.
Got it. That makes sense. So we were speaking to an eyeglass company earlier today, and they're creating an augmented reality app so that way you can see, you map your face with the phone, and then you can see how the glasses are going to fit your face without actually being there. But it seems like with a Brand Besties situation where you've got offline to online, you're really maximizing the traditional experience of being able to experience the product. Like you were saying, the consultations in CVS.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Like, let's see how the skin tones actually, you know, how the makeup actually looks versus how my cell phone camera and my old iPhone 7 is going to look versus like an iPhone 11, right?
Right. Yeah. And it's an in-person experience. It's just a different kind of experience, right? Because you're occupying a space. You can hold the product in your hand. You can talk to someone. So I think really there's been a lot of talk around the death of retail. And I think people are missing the point, because it's not that retail is dying, it's transforming. Yes, so it's starting to be used in different ways. So there was an article actually recently in the Washington Post about this mammoth mall that's being built in New Jersey. And a majority of the space that's going to be occupying the mall is entertainment.
Sure.
So they're going to have like a massive ski slope thing where you can go skiing and snowboarding at a fraction of the cost of, having to buy lift tickets and everything. So it makes skiing much more accessible. There's going to be like a amusement park. And by the way, yes, there'll be stores too. But it's the same developers that did Mall of America. So it's really kind of rethinking what is a mall? What is retail? What are our expectations for those sorts of spaces? And I think what's happening is that retail isn't dying. It's being transformed into more of a place for entertainment.
Gotcha. So I've got a question. This is one I didn't ask you about earlier, but let's say I'm an up-and-coming online brand, and I'm like, man, I wish I could get those eyeballs at this retail outlet. How do I go about, if I'm upstart, cool, hip brand, how do I get out there and start to establish those relationships with some of these people, or identify even who I would want to partner with most?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think you have to really think strategically. So you need to think, first of all, what are my goals in doing this? What do I want to achieve? And then also, who am I trying to reach? Who are my audiences? Because I think when you look at the most successful kind of brand bestie relationships, there's a kind of confluence around audiences that they're trying to reach. There's something about the audiences that make the relationship make sense, and also the sort of goals of what they're hoping to achieve. So I think a lot of it is thinking really strategically around what are you trying to achieve, what's kind of the end game, and then who are you trying to reach, and then start thinking of brands that kind of align with your brand in terms of your purpose and your mission, and then also have done a really good job at attracting the kind of people you're trying to attract, and start creating a short list of those brands. Right.
So maybe brands that are potentially growing, or the trajectory looks good or whatnot.
Right. Or maybe, depending on kind of what you're trying to do, is it a brand that has an established brick and mortar presence? Is it a brand that already has a lot of traffic or loyalty around their website or online destination? Is it potentially you want to have a role within an app, like Fortnite, for example, a game? So really just kind of thinking about what assets does both the brand have and that you have that you can offer that would be valuable to that other person.
I'm glad you brought that up. One of the coolest Brand Besties stories I ever saw was how Marshmello, the DJ, actually had the biggest concert of all time inside of Fortnite.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's hilarious. I also heard the story of, oh my God, now I'm going to forget the name of the band. They were like a band that was really big in the 90s, and the lead singer was sitting around with his son or daughter playing Fortnite. And he's like, man, we should do a concert in that.
Yeah.
And so they did. Weezer was the name of the band.
I love that band.
Yeah. So it's just, it's amazing kind of the creativity and what's possible now.
That is cool. So, all right. So we've established, we've gone out, we've pursued a brand, we've somehow connected. We're dating, right?
Yes.
So how do we evaluate the relationship?
So I think it goes back to, you want to make sure that you have clear goals starting off, because you can't measure if you don't know what you're trying to achieve. And then pick, KPIs that will help indicate your progress towards that goal. Measurement, I think, often gets very complicated because people think, well, we've got so much data available to us that we need to collect all of it. And I think that's really a distraction. I'm a big proponent in simplification. And so if you're very clear on what your goal is and your KPIs in order to measure that, then you can really focus on the data that matters most.
That makes sense, because really, I mean, everyone who really is gets into marketing understands that multi-channel campaigns are very, very effective, right? And a lot of people are stuck on this last click attribution. What is the phone number they use? But it's a combination. It's the contribution, not the attribution of all the parts, right? So when you're entering in a brand bestie type relationship, it could be very complicated to try to cross geofence. Well, did they pass through the Nordstrom's geo barrier and then later check out, on the mattress or something? So I guess you could get really tripped up if you try to make it too complicated. You probably should look and see if there's an overall lift. Right.
Yeah, I think that's true. And then maybe have you're going to want to measure progress to a goal, but then maybe you also want to measure just effectiveness of channel. So have goals for your individual channels to be able to say, are they performing the way we expected them to within this larger campaign?
Right. I watched a training on how to evaluate YouTube marketing, and they were saying that the view throughs from YouTube are way higher than the click throughs, and so it's kind of the same sort of thing where maybe what you're doing is you're measuring the direct and organic traffic. If you're measuring it from the DTC side, right, the online DTC side, and look and see, once you establish or launch this relationship in the geo areas where those brand buddies, if it's a retail outlet, is the direct and organic traffic in the same control. But if it can step above a standard deviation or so, you can see that, hey, we truly are getting more eyeballs and it's turning into web visits or maybe point of sale purchases or whatnot in the retail outlet.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
Well, cool. So let's say we've established it. We've got a measurement scheme. How long should we try it out for?
That's a really great question. I don't think there's any one answer to that. I think some of that is important as you're kind of planning your strategy and thinking about your goals. How long does it make sense to do something based on what you're trying to achieve? Because you've got to give your time to kind of be successful. So it also does depend on your goal, because if it's I'm making this up, but let's take CVS. If they are, and I think they actually did this, if they are running this store within a store as a kind of pilot to see if they should run it out nationwide, right? So in some cases, if you're just testing something, it's going to be open for, I would guess something like that's retail based would be for a month or two. But then maybe the test shows you that, look, we should be having this open 365 days a year.
Right.
So I think testing is really important. If you want to see if you should have something kind of permanent. But the nice thing about pop-ups is they are in themselves tests. So for a lot of these brand bestie campaigns, really they're just kind of tests. They're kind of designed to be short-term experiments.
Well, and also, especially if you're in a big corporate environment, you almost need to have a contingency plan in case it works. What if you determine that it works? You don't need to wait till the 2021 budget season to now allocate resources to roll this out.
Right. Yeah, that's a great point. You have to be nimble to take advantage, because you might, even in the experimentation, you're going to discover certain things, right? People are going to use products and spaces in ways you hadn't anticipated. So you need to be flexible enough and nimble enough to take those learnings and apply them.
Very good. Well, Thanks for joining us today and talking about Brand Besties. Anything else you want to add about Brand Besties or things we should look out for?
Yeah, I think, one thing that's been really fun in talking about trends is you realize they don't pop out of nowhere and then disappear the next day. You start, like, when since I've given that talk, you start seeing things constantly. You're like, oh my gosh, it's a brand bestie. So it's just, I challenge everybody to keep your eye open and see what brand besties you find. And if you find any, I would love to hear about them, and you can share them with me on Twitter. I'm at Leigh George, or on LinkedIn, and just tag me there too. Because it's always fun to see what people discover.
Absolutely. Thanks. And we definitely have to connect as brand besties and create the dating app for our brands.
That's right.
So
exactly.
So thanks again for joining us, Leigh. I appreciate your time. And thanks again for joining us for another episode of the Law of Relevancy podcast. I'm Cord Zoen, and you can find this podcast shared on all of our social media. And soon it's going to be on the Apple Store as well. Thanks again for joining us. We'll see you next time.